Alrighty, so we're back. Now, at this point, we're starting our final project, our last project, Project 6, which is going to be our troll project. So in this case, we're starting with a new scene. And of course, as we often do, we can go File, and we can go to Project Window, right? And we can, of course, create a new project. So I'm just going to go New, give it the standard kind of naming convention we use, DAA, underscore, intro to 3D modeling underscore 240. For you guys, it'll kind of depend on which class you're in, 240A, 240B. In this case, I'll just kind of make that DAA. I'll just use generic 240 because I'm using it for both classes this time around. And then, of course, the term, spring 20, and then underscore your name. And then underscore, and of course this will be Project 6, so we'll call it Project 6. There we go. And of course we can kind of tell what we want to save it at. In this case, you guys are going to be working from home, so you can just save it right to your desktop. In this case, that's what I'm going to do, just kind of save it right to the desktop. And then we hit Accept, and that creates a project for us. Now, of course, we can go File, and we can go File, Set Project, right? So Project Window is where we create a project, but Setting Project is where we tell it to be the active project. And we can see there it is, Project 6. We just select the folder, hit Set, and now that's the active project. Now, in this case, and I'll talk about it at the conference, basically you want to import a file download, right? Because we're actually going to use a 3D file reference. In fact, I'm going to show you guys how to create layers today. It's one of the things we haven't talked about as much, is how to do layers. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to import something. Now this will be in the file section of Canvas, and I'll talk about that more when we have our conference. But if you just go to Files, you should be able to find the character FBX or OBJ. Doesn't really matter which one you import in. Doesn't really matter. So in this case, I just like to give you guys two formats just in case one doesn't work. So we go File, Import, and we've done this before, right? We kind of did it with Project 5 in particular when we built our room and put all our room stuff in. So there's that earlier video, but never hurts to see it again, right? So we go File, Import. In this case, I'm just going to go to my computer because I'm home. So I'll find where I put my stuff at. And there we go. It should be in here. And you'll see either an FBX or an OBJ. Of course, this will be in your Files section of Canvas that you'll download one of those. I'll just grab the FBX, but you import it, right? So we import it in. And there we can see is the troll we're actually going to build. Now, when I click on it, you can notice that I've made it quite dense, right? I've got a couple smooths, and I triangulated it. That way you can't really just turn my model in, right? I made sure to put a little booby trap in there so that you actually have to make your own, right? But I just wanted to show you how to make. But we're going to be making this guy. So when you're building it, don't say, oh, I can make my own troll. You cannot make your own troll. You have to make this troll, right? So you want to try to reproduce this as closely as possible, or fairly closely. Much like all of our other reference stuff. Now in this case, you can see there's a lot of translates over here, so if you want, you don't have to do this because we're going to put on a layer anyways, but if you want to, you can just kind of select all these, right click on them, and then you can do what's called break connection. And that'll just kind of get rid of any of the quick keys that you saw down here. Sometimes it just brings that stuff in because I built this guy in Modo and brought it over. So basically, if you want to get rid of that, you can, but technically we're just going to put on a layer anyways, but pretty easy just to select those, and then right click, break connection, and it gets rid of any keyframes. Now, in this case, this guy's also pretty small, right? So we're going to go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Preferences. So this is kind of a nice little quick video we're doing on that stuff again. And then when it brings up the menu, we go to Settings. And we see this is set to centimeters. And we've done this tons of times, right, already. This is just kind of one last little reinforcement of that stuff. So we go to meters, hit Save. And now we can see that this troll is quite small. So in this case, we want to make this troll larger. And he can be like a 6-foot tall troll, so we'll hit R for scale. We'll just grab that center one and drag it up. Just to let you guys know, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but believe it or not, if whatever your last manipulator was selected, if you hold that middle mouse button, it'll actually do that, right? So whatever your last manipulator selected was, if you hold that middle mouse button, it'll actually use that to scale. Kind of neat to know. It is the last manipulator selected. So kind of cool. You don't have to use that, but thought you might find it neat. All right, so we made that guy kind of roughly about 6 foot tall or so, because these are set to meters now, so that's about 6 foot. So he's about, 2 meters tall, roughly. And of course, we're going to go modify, freeze transformations just to reset those scales back to 1. And at this point, I'm also just going to go File, Save Scene As. And it's going to go, make sure to set my project again. File, Set Project, because it got set to that other one. Project 6, Set. And then we'll go File, Save Scene As. And it's just going to go right to the project. And in this case, I'll just kind of copy a lot of this, right? Sometimes it'd be easy to just copy that. And then just get rid of the scenes backslash part for project 6. We can save as. And there we go. Now we get the project saved. It's set to the right size. We froze transforms on them. What we want to do is we want to put this guy in a layer though. So we select the object, right? So we just left click on it, select it. And we make sure we're in the channel box layer editor right here, right? Not modeling toolkit, not the attribute editor, but the channel box layer editor right here. And you see down here is an area called layers, right? Layers. You see how there's one for animation, there's just one for display. We're going to be using the display one. And you'll see there's a layers menu here. And you can create an empty layer. You can control the membership of layers. You can move objects from layers. But you can also create a layer from selected, right? So we can create a layer from selected. So there we go. And we now see I can click off this object and you see that there's a layer here. Now, if we want, we can name that, right? If you double click on it, you can give it a name. You can call this troll, right? You don't have to name yours though, right? But just want to show you guys you can do that. Save. And you'll notice there's some controls here for it, right? There's the V, that's the visibility. Now you'll notice there's P, and that's much more for playback stuff for animations. We can leave that alone. And then there's the last one, which is kind of empty, right? If we click on that, you'll notice it becomes template, T for template. And you notice what that means. This is wireframe. And you notice I can't select it anymore, right? So it's wireframe, and I can't select it. If I click on that T, it's going to turn to R, which is reference, right? Reference. And you'll see it looks shaded like normal, but I still can't select it. If I click on R, it becomes empty again, and it's selectable. So that's the neat thing about layers. Do you have to use layers? No, we've actually gotten gotten by fine without it the whole semester, really. But when we use another model as a reference, it can kind of be cool to have layers. And it's a cool way to organize things if you want to outside of Outliner. So it's kind of one of those things where it's great to see it at some point, right? So I kind of usually save it for the character model because we have this guy and we want to not be able to edit this, right? We just want it to be the background. So this model is actually going to act like our reference images, right? Usually you create free image plane, but here we're not. So I'm going to hit T. I'm going to hit that empty spot to T. And I'm going to hit R to reference, right? That way we can see it is shaded. And it's up to you which one we want to use. If you want to use template, if you want to use reference, that's fine. There's no right or wrong in that instance. It's whatever you like best. I'm going to use R for reference, and it makes it not selectable. And that's what's cool, is by creating that layer from selected, it made this object a member of that layer. And you see there's more options here now. You can delete layers, all that stuff. If you go to options here, there's like not much there really. But basically we're just kind of using it to put this on the background, right? If you want, you can turn the visibility off temporarily, that kind of stuff. Now, one other thing that we haven't talked about as much yet, and this you might find useful if you're going to use reference, we have isolate select right here, right? It's kind of that blue cursor or white cursor, blue dotted box. Next to it is something that looks like two white boxes kind of crossing each other. That's called X-ray. And there's a couple of X-ray ones here, like X-ray active component, X-ray joints for rigging. We're just going to use normal X-ray. But when we click on that, what it does is it makes everything partially transparent in the scene. Even the model you're going to build. So it's kind of one of those things where if you really wanted to have your object not transparent, but the reference model transparent, then what you could do is you could assign a new material to the reference model. And we know how to do that, right? Create material. In this case, you wouldn't even have to worry about it being an Arnold standard surface. If you just wanted to like throw a Lambert on there and then just put up the transparency slider, you can. But X-ray should be fine for us, right? So we'll just turn X-ray on. And that's cool to know about, right? Because at some point when you're doing a lot of modeling, you might need to kind of see through certain models or use some models as references. And X-ray can kind of be cool. So it's right next to isolate select. It's right there. All right. So I'm going to save that because now I've got my layer created. We now know about how to create and work with the basics of layers. We know about X-ray. And that's one of the big things I kind of wanted to get started on this video. Now we're going to do a little bit more before we do another video to finish this up. What I wanted to do now is I wanted to start to build this character. Now I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in conference because that's actually be a great place to really talk about some concept stuff. But when you're building characters and creatures, these deform, they change shape, they animate, they move. So we have to put in more edge loops at things like elbows, knees, and knuckles so they can bend better. We need to try to mimic kind of the actual way the muscles and bone structure create shape and form, right? We're going to put a shoulder loop in the next video that's going to create our pectoral girdle, right? I'm going to talk about that more specifically in the conference and as we go along, but I'll probably save the conferences for a little bit more of the theoretical discussion on that stuff. So let's start to build our character. Now in this case, I'm going to switch back to Modeling Toolkit, and believe it or not, we're going to build this character from a box. We're going to box model this character. In fact, this is this method. In fact, we use a lot of box modeling this term. But believe it or not, character modeling is actually a quite popular method still, and kind of one of the classic methods is box modeling. You create a cube, and when you put enough edge loops on it and extrude, you actually end up having a character, right? Newsflash, we're going to use lots of multi-cut, lots of extrusion on this character, right? So we're not actually having to know as many new tools. We're actually using some classics. There are 2 new ones. We'll talk about Connect a little bit more, although we've seen that a little bit already. And we are going to show the spin edge tool and a few shaping tools. In fact, some of that stuff we'll see in the next video. So I'm going to go to Create. And if we want, we can close Outliner down, right? Remember, Windows Outliner brings this up. You can keep it up if you want to. If you right-click on the word Outliner, you can close it. That way, if you just want to maximize the space a little more, you can. So I'm going to go to Create, and I'm going to create a polygon primitive cube, right? We want a cube primitive for this. So polygon primitive cube, there we go, drops it in. You see it's an X-ray also. I'm going to hit R for scale, right? R for scale, left click on the center one. Although if you want to use middle mouse button, because that was the last one selected. So whatever manipulator handler's yellow one is the one that's actually going to work, right? I can grab this one and then scale it up a little bit in the green. W for move it up a little bit. Move it forward a little bit. R for scale it in a little more. W for move it forward. I'm just kind of using some of these manipulator handles really quick. Maybe R for scale a little bit more just to make it a little taller there. Something like that. If we want, we can go to Channel Box Layer Editor to freeze these transforms, but I think we'll leave that alone, and that'll just be a great thing to just do at the end of the model like we normally do. Now in this case, R for scale, we'll just scale it out a little bit more. In this case we need, and you can see this box is really going to be our torso. And we're actually going to extrude the arms, legs, head structure off of that. So now what I want to do is I want to get an edge loop down the center, right? We know this from a lot of other projects earlier this term, that particularly if you want symmetry to work well for you, if you want to be able to delete half your model to mirror it over later on, something weird, you want to put an edge loop right down the center. Right, so that's where we turn our multi-cut tool on, right? Now in this case, multi-cut has options, right? So we can go to the snap percentage size, right? It's the very top option of multi-cut. And I'm going to set that to 50, because that'll just let me put edge loops right down the middle. So remember, multi-cut. Remember, Control-Shift-X is the quick key for it, right? Hold down Control, and you see, of course, if we hold down Control, we put our edge over another edge, you'll see it's going to want to put an edge loop. But if we hold Control-Shift, right, it's going to snap. So I can put an edge loop right down the center there. And I'm going to put a few edge loops on the sides here, kind of one about the armpit. These you don't have to snap, just the center one, because you need one right on the center. So put an edge loop right down for the armpits, kind of right down here for the hips, and maybe one more for kind of the middle of the torso. So just like get 2 or 3 edge loops in there. Now in this case, this is organic. Right, so much like all of our really boxy hard surface stuff, our desks, our room, our nightstand, our end table, we kept low res, right? But we've seen that some of our stuff that had a lot more roundness and curvature, our chair, our clock radio, this character, smooth preview can be a great shortcut, right? Remember, my biggest rule about smooth preview is if you're going to work in smooth preview, you better smooth your model. You want your low res to look good. We're just using this as a shortcut to blocking in the primary forms, right? Basically, the better your mesh looks in low resolution, the less necessary it is to work in smooth preview. It's at its most useful, the smooth preview, in the early to intermediate stages when you're blocking in all the primary shapes. So I'm going to hit 3, right, because that's going to put this into smooth preview. And I'm going to turn multi-cut off for the moment. And I want to turn symmetry on, right? So good old symmetry right here in Modeling Toolkit. So we click on that. Now, in this case, we could probably start off with our world X, but world X can drift, right? We've talked about this briefly, and we've seen it a little bit earlier on, but the world ones, the more tweaks, the more shaping you do, which this character's going to have a lot of shaping, the more likely one side is to break over the other side, or to like become lazy compared to the other side. It'll be slightly off shape-wise. And world symmetry and object symmetry will no longer work for that, right? So they have their strengths, but in this case, since we're going to do a lot, when you're basically dealing with a much more complicated model where you're going to do lots of shape tweaking, world starts to kind of fall apart a little bit. So I usually go down to the very bottom one, the very last symmetry feature here, topology, right? So I'm going to click on topology, and it's going to ask us for pick an edge. And you see how we pick an edge on that center edge loop, right? So that center edge, we just pick an edge, and then you see symmetry is turned on. So we have symmetry like we'd expect it to be on. And this is going to give us the ability to, hold down right mouse button. We can go to face mode. And I can grab that face, and I can hit W for move, and I can move this back a little bit, right? Because that's going to kind of be the top of the torso there. Now remember, you can use free move, right? You can move according to these, but you can also just grab that center one to freely move it, right? It'll move based on the camera. Now, of course, we can switch to different selection types. So I can hold down right mouse button. I can go to edge mode, right? And I can grab this edge. In this case, I'm just using middle mouse button because the last selected manipulator I used was the little kind of center one, right? Remember, it uses the last selected one though, so it's not by default going to go to the center necessarily. But it's kind of a cool little feature that you can kind of just click on your middle mouse button to do these little shape adjustments if you want to. And you see I'm kind of basically just kind of building a little bit of kind of the S curve that our back has in there, right? Because believe it or not, people, characters, creatures aren't necessarily straight, right? They're made of lots of curves and forms. And so as you're building this, you're really going to take advantage of having a decent reference model to kind of get a little bit of kind of that S curvature in there, right? So this is going to give us kind of a good starting point for our troll. Now at this point, I'm going to extrude the arm off. So I'm going to hold down right mouse button to go to face selection mode again. Remember, hold down right mouse button over your object, and you get your marking menu, face. I'll just select this face. And we're going to extrude, right? Remember the quick key for that's Control E. So if I just hit Control E, right, that'll extrude it. And I usually like to switch to middle mouse button in this instance, move it. Right? Remember, you can grab the free one, and you'll find that the free move, much like on the clock radio, can actually be really cool on this, right? When I do stuff with a lot of curvature and a lot more organic forms, even if it's like a spaceship or a car, I tend to use free move a lot more than the manipulator handles, right? The manipulator handles come in handy plenty of times, but sometimes it's just a lot easier just to do your free move. In this case, I'm just using the middle mouse button for it. We can do E for rotate. And you notice the last one selected was the view rotate. But remember, rotate actually has a view rotate as well. So you can just kind of rotate based on the view. R for scale. You can scale that center one in there a little bit. And then I can just do another extrusion. Control E for extrude. Move that. R for scale. And you notice how by using the middle mouse button, since I last used the center, is actually kind of neat, right? And I'll do one more extrusion. So in this case, you can see I'm kind of using that middle mouse button since I've used the view move and these is kind of my manipulators, but it's kind of up to you if you want to use it. You can always grab that manipulator handle in the center. I'm going to go to edge mode really quick. I'm going to grab that edge and just to remind you guys, you can double click, right? Double left click on an edge. That's going to kind of be the elbow, right? And then we can come in here, we can just kind of shape it from the different views, right? Like I said, X-ray can be a little bit weird because of the nature of it's being see-through. So like I said, it's kind of up to you on which kind of option you really want to use for this. If you'd rather use templates, remember you can go back to Channel Box Layer Editor, and you can switch this to template if you want to. And template might work a little bit better for you, right? You might be able to see through a little bit more. And you can always go back and forth, right? You can kind of just leave X-ray on and then just kind of go back and forth between this. I leave that up to you guys, right? It's kind of really a personal choice on how you want to kind of control that. But you notice I'm kind of going in here and shaping everything, and you notice I'm trying to keep the shape here from getting too skewed. Like if you're seeing like a lot of this, that's not good shape, right? And you're going to sit there and say, oh, well, my extrude didn't work right. No, your shape is not good. It has nothing to do with the extrusion. The extrusion worked fine. What you have to do is you have to either select that edge or that face, and you have to move it until you get the shape you want. Or in this case, you can see I'm just kind of trying to make sure to kind of straighten it a little bit more, right? So generally you want these to be reasonably straight, not having too much of a kind of a slant. The smooth preview is going to give it a little bit of roundness, right? But you still want it to be kind of fairly squarish, right? Nothing like that, right? Now, that's one of those things where you're going to be sitting there like, man, this shaping's hard. I must be doing something wrong. No. Guess what? You guys are just going to have to tinker a lot with this character. There's just no way around the fact that you just have to shape, right? You have to select stuff, move it. Now, you notice I'm not trying to get everything absolutely perfect in this shape right now. And that is because this is kind of like the gesture drawing stage, right? Hopefully some of you guys have taken figure drawing already. But this is like gesture drawing, right? We're really just trying to block in the basic forms, not trying to get every little detail, right? It's so much easier to get a good, clean kind of primary form if you're just focusing on it being simple, right? So you notice I'm not extruding 20 times. Guys, do not do that. It's going to hurt you at this stage. Don't sit there and go, well, I need to put in the elbow, every little elbow detail right now. You do not. This troll is stylized, and you really want to block in the primary forms first. So we're really just kind of putting in a handful of edge loops, a couple of extrusions, just to get the kind of major, kind of overall kind of shape and length and proportion, right? So that'll be a great place to stop for this video, and then we'll kind of do the rest of the character up to this stage, up until kind of Wednesday, like in the next class session that I want you to have done. So that'll be a great place to stop.